E-commerce and the online world in general represent a paradigm shift. We've completely changed how we consume things, and how we consume media too. That's why e-commerce is so relevant today. Generative AI has brought a fundamental change. Ordinary users are now consciously interacting with artificial intelligence. But I believe that mixed reality, everything that falls under that umbrella, is the most promising technology when it comes to shopping experiences, whether offline or online.
Today we're recording our next interview here, in the city of Hamburg. It's raining outside, but it's warm and cozy in our studio. And now I'd like to welcome you to our guest, Mr. Juan José Dardon Mota, who is Head of Innovation Management at Otto, a company most of you probably know. Welcome, Juan José.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Juan José, let's start with the first question. Many people who know you are aware of your impressive background. You've been working in this industry for over 20 years now. And for almost 5 of those, you've been with the Otto Group. However, in the past few decades, retail and e-commerce have undergone enormous changes. In that context, I'd like to ask you, in your opinion, have the developments of recent years been a clear paradigm shift, or rather a carefully thought-out evolution?
I think e-commerce and the online world in general represent a paradigm shift. We've completely changed how we consume things, and how we consume media too. That's why e-commerce is so relevant today. In the 20 years I've been in the business, I'd say many things have felt very natural as a kind of evolution. At least to me. For instance, how Amazon entered the market, starting just with books and gradually scaling from there. That seemed very, very natural. But I think that the real shift, the one we could call a paradigm shift indeed, was that companies had to move existing retail models, like Otto's mail order catalog, into this entirely new world of digital media and online platforms.
Are there any particular characteristics, any specifics, when it comes to the DACH region in this respect? I'm asking because Otto originally started sending out those catalogs right here in Germany. I believe that was already 30 or 40 years ago, or maybe even earlier. I still remember, when I was a kid, my parents also had those catalogs at home. And I think it would be interesting, for me and for our viewers, to know, does Germany specifically, or the DACH region in general, have any unique features when it comes to retail and e-commerce?
I think if you look at traditional retail models, yes, absolutely. The way you set up a business is often very localized, especially in terms of goods. Seasons also play a role in what products you sell and where. There were many catalog retailers, but Otto just turned 75 this year. The company has been around that long, and the catalog actually existed until 2018. So it really hasn't been that long since it was discontinued. At least it's so for the Otto brand. I think what's special about Germany is that customers here tend to be very critical. I can say they're also more price-sensitive compared to other Europeans. One of the things that made catalog retail work, and that really defined Otto, was this idea that you could order something, receive it first, and then pay by invoice. And I think that's an obvious characteristic of the market in Germany, because here, this payment by invoice mindset is still deeply rooted in our people. So when you run an online shop, you really have to offer a broad range of payment options. Otherwise, you risk losing that segment of customers. As for other countries, first, a lot more people have credit cards. Second, people usually prefer to pay right away. You don't really want to forget that there's still an invoice waiting to be paid later, right? So that's a real peculiarity of the German market, and it's something that's evolved over time. Otherwise, when it comes to online, if you look at brands like Zalando or About You, which is part of the Otto Group, they've basically created a product that works across multiple countries. And then you adapt your catalog, the selection of products you sell, to local specifics. Of course, there are brands that perform especially well in the Nordics or in Spain, for example. But I think that overall, things have become much more normalized and standardized across Europe.
I know the Otto Group really invests a lot in innovation, especially to improve internal workflows. Of course, this also helps you create better customer experiences. So, what drives this creativity? Where do you get inspiration and that innovative spirit to be able to do things like this?
I think it naturally changes over time. But let me take a step back. The whole catalog retailer model itself was actually quite innovative when it started. It was something new in that particular form. And I think this spirit of innovation has always been part of the Otto Group's DNA. What I mean, these are entrepreneurs, business people and entrepreneurs who are constantly evolving, questioning themselves and thinking, okay, how can I serve my customers even better? Is there anything else I could do for them? So it's a natural development. In slower times, before we went online, you could plan changes better, test things out more carefully, and then place the right bets, so to speak. But today, things are different. I'm talking about a different phase now. And in the innovation management at the Otto Group, we actually focus specifically on technical or technological innovation. That means our inspiration usually comes from other technologies, and always with this underlying question: how will consumer behavior change in the future because of this technology? Is there something we need to prepare for? Should we anticipate that, for example, customers might only shop in the metaverse someday? That's really the core of our focus. Also, what we used to call competitor monitoring isn't that helpful anymore. Honestly, we're all doing more or less the same thing. Pretty similar stuff. There are certain capabilities an online shop has to offer. Sizing tools, style advice, large product images, ideally even 3D views you can rotate. So yes, there are already many industry standards, and if your brand doesn't offer them yet, then you're actively working toward them. But beyond that, it's more about building an ecosystem of services. So if you have a customer who does a lot of shopping through your app, what else can you offer them within that very app to add value? And it's not just about e-commerce anymore. It could also be other types of services. For example, let's say someone buys a wardrobe. Maybe right there in the app, they already get a video or step-by-step instructions on how to assemble it. Just as an example, I think there are questions we should always be asking ourselves. How can we make everyday life easier for the customer? And what technologies are available to help us do that? And how will those technologies evolve? That's really important.
So essentially, it's about staying a few steps ahead of the customer. You should always anticipate what they might want before they even realize it. And in that context, I'd like to ask you about the initiative called Kulturwandel 4.0, cultural change. I know it's very important within your company, especially when it comes to diversity, openness, transparency, and collaboration among people from different cultural backgrounds. Could you maybe share a few words about it?
Sure, gladly. So, cultural change. This project is still ongoing, but it's evolving over time. It's natural because the needs of the company also change. I'd highlight two key aspects of it. First, cultural transformation was absolutely necessary in order to make that shift from a catalog-based business to a true e-commerce company. You need a completely different mindset for that, a different way of approaching things, and a different kind of collaboration. In traditional companies, you often find really hierarchical structures. That means you have people who make decisions, others who are there to support those decisions, and then specialists who are responsible for putting them into practice. But today, speed is absolutely essential. That's why we need to empower our teams to make decisions more independently. That's a core aspect of this cultural transformation. The other part is something that became especially clear and visible across the company during the COVID pandemic. Roughly a year before COVID hit, we had started rolling out Office 365. By the time the first lockdown came, everyone already had Microsoft Teams on their computers, so we were able to keep working right away, just in a different way than before. And that, in turn, led to a real shift in how we collaborate across the organization. People became more open, and everyone focused on achieving goals despite the difficult situation. I think that was the moment when all the work done on cultural change really became visible. It became clear how valuable and necessary it had been for the company. And what's important now, in this current phase, we should make sure that cultural change isn't seen as a separate initiative anymore. It should flow into everything. It should be part of every initiative, embedded in every team. And that's exactly what my colleagues who are working on these topics are focusing on right now.
The world is changing rapidly. Every day brings new innovations. Keeping up with those changes, not always easy, but staying ahead, absolutely essential. Artificial intelligence today, something even bigger tomorrow. But what truly drives your business forward? Andersen is here to spot challenges, analyze them and solve them, with solutions that are precise and dependable. No in-house developers required. We provide the expertise, 17 years of experience, a trusted partner to leading global companies. With over 3,000 IT experts, we're ready to move your business forward. Follow the link to get your free consultation. Well, it's interesting you brought up the COVID-19 pandemic because my next question is about potential challenges companies can face. Usually, a company's growth follows a pretty clear and predictable path, so you can expect your potential evolution over time. But then there are political or social disruptions, or so-called black swans, that can really shake things up. COVID-19 was, of course, a clear example of that. And what's interesting in such cases is how a company reacts strategically when something unexpected like that happens. What can one actually do when such challenges suddenly arise? So I'd like to ask you whether you've encountered such situations during your career, whether at Otto or in other companies you've worked for, and how you handled them when they came up.
Well, I wouldn't call those events big black swans, actually. On the other hand, COVID was something that deeply affected all of us, no doubt. During that time, my role within the Otto Group changed as well, and that wasn't really easy. Just think about it. You start with a new team, but only meet them in person 8 months later. That was completely new for us all, naturally. But before I joined the Otto Group, I had worked at a few startups, so I perfectly know what it's like to miss out on a funding round. You basically have to shut down the whole operation. I've been through things like that, and there is something that has shaped my life. Well, I'm not originally from Germany. I moved around quite a bit as a child. I had to change schools often, so learning how to deal with change is really a skill you have to develop. And I believe that as an entrepreneur, or as a company, you also need to nurture and develop this kind of resilience to change among your employees.
Juan Jose, I have one more question about your experience with startups. I know you worked at several startups before joining the Otto Group. What kind of experiences did you gain there? Is there anything important you really learned during that time? Have you incorporated that into your further professional career?
Speed and decisiveness. Those are the most important takeaways for me. In a startup, you're more likely to take risks and accept the possibility of mistakes. The sooner you decide, the faster you realize whether something is working or not. Then you can adjust things accordingly. In large organizations, that's still one of the key cultural gaps that needs to be addressed. At Otto, we've made real progress in making decisions more quickly. But even so, the pace still isn't quite as fast as what I experienced in the past. I also believe that in every startup, especially in the early phase, there's a clear vision and a clear goal. And that shared drive, when everyone's working toward the same thing, can be incredibly motivating. That really worked, and for me, it always worked well. Personal sensitivities didn't surface that much because everyone was aware of what we were doing and why. The purpose was clear to all of us. And the bigger you get, and this is true for startups as well, they're not immune in this respect. The more the organization grows and the more expertise it gains, the more people naturally want to fully own and shape their areas of responsibility. But then silos start forming again, and those may not be all that helpful. I think that's something that can also emerge in startups as they grow. One thing I personally always enjoyed about startup life is that you question yourself and your business model much more quickly. Since you're usually entering a market to be disruptive or to be the first to do something in a certain way, you're constantly monitoring what's happening. You need to be fully aware of who's entering the market, what else is coming, and so on.
Juan Jose, I'd like to ask you, today, when customer expectations are constantly growing and competition keeps getting tougher, what do you think is essential to really survive under these circumstances? Over the past months and years, we've seen a number of major fashion retailers actually go bankrupt, probably because they just couldn't keep up with that level of competition. In your opinion, what is key to staying strong in such a market?
Well, as a technologist, I can say that it's always technology that actually helps you move forward in the end. I think many of these well-known brands and traditional companies have simply suffered a lot because they were unable to get rid of their tech legacy. Meaning, if you don't innovate, if you aren't able to modernize your processes through technology, at some point, the cost pressure just becomes too great, and these old systems become a heavy burden when you look at your overall cost structure. That's exactly the kind of challenge we're trying to tackle head-on. Of course, we also still have legacy systems, but it's always about designing business models in a flexible way for the future and building technology.
Yes, sure.
That allows you to keep up with those changes.
To keep up with those changes. And how does communication with your customers work in this context? How do you gather feedback from them? I mean, no matter the product, just across your entire product range, how do you best communicate with customers to determine whether something is successful or needs to be adjusted?
Well, that's quite diverse, actually. Of course, you always have platform reviews, for example. Such feedback helps you understand how your products are received. Even if sales figures look good, you still want to know if there are returns, if people are complaining, and what signals you get from customer support. Now, legacy systems often make it harder to access all that in one place. And that's the real challenge. If you really can pull together all these different data points, where customers are giving you feedback, whether directly or indirectly, into a complete picture, then you can make decisions more quickly and drive change faster. That's a huge advantage compared to a situation where you first have to painstakingly gather all those scattered data silos and somehow figure out where some patterns are. And I think that's one of the key things. For us, staying consistently close to the customer is absolutely essential, and there are several touchpoints for that. One big advantage we have as a group is that Hermes is also part of the group. And since Hermes handles last-mile delivery, it creates one final touchpoint with the customer, where you can always ultimately source valuable data about satisfaction and related feedback.
I have a question about artificial intelligence. I don't think we can avoid this topic, since everyone is talking about it right now. So, retail, e-commerce, and AI, I feel like these are closely connected. So, my next question is, how are you already using AI in your workflows? And one more related question, it's clear that there is a growing push to use AI routinely as part of daily processes. But isn't there also a risk, especially in the context of retail and e-commerce, that many of these processes will end up being automated? Could that lead to job losses in the end? Should people actually worry about their future because of that?
I think I should start by drawing a quick distinction between GenAI, Generative AI, and what we'd call classical AI. So, when it comes to classical AI, we've actually been doing a lot of work within the Otto Group for more than 10 years now. For things like forecasting, for all kinds of predictions, and personalization. Even chatbots, we had them in place before. But generative AI has brought a fundamental change. Ordinary users are now consciously interacting with artificial intelligence. Before, you would use your social media feed. Those personalized feeds are powered by some kind of AI too, but you would interact with them indirectly, like consuming the feed, your friends' posts, news, ads. Whatever it may be, but you're not actively asking the machine anything. You're not directly engaging with it. And that's where the fear comes from. Suddenly, there's something that can do things people haven't perceived before. Anyway, when it comes to generative AI, I think we're still very much at the beginning. A lot of these tools just aren't ready to be released to end users because of hallucinations and the flawed output they can generate. And as a company, we need to set clear priorities and decide where we want to apply generative AI in ways that help people in their work rather than replace them. And that's exactly the focus for us. It's not about artificial intelligence only, not AI alone, but as we say in our team, it's rather about human-centered AI. That means people still matter most of all, and it's not some kind of AI that could replace you. It's someone using it to become better or faster at what they do. And that takes a lot of change and a lot of support for employees to help them learn that GenAI tools can actually be their allies. They make everyday tasks easier, giving us more space to concentrate on things that really matter in the long run.
So, ideally, it actually creates more room for creativity, giving people the chance to use their time more effectively for those creative tasks, while routines can partially be taken over by AI. And how are you using generative AI, specifically when it comes to image creation, for example? Is that something you are already applying in your processes? Like, are you generating images of clothing or furniture?
Exactly. But I'd also make a distinction here. We've actually been working with CGI in the Otto Group for quite a while now. That means, for many product groups, we don't even do traditional photo shoots anymore. If all the data for, say, a kitchen or a piece of furniture is available digitally, then you can generate those images with the help of machines. It's not GenAI in the sense of writing prompts, but rather a fully algorithm-driven process based on real data. A kitchen has certain dimensions, certain colors, specific materials, and all that gets replicated digitally. That's something we've been doing for some time now. Where generative AI can help, for example, is in the fashion area. Thanks to it, you can gain inspiration for a new clothing line, for instance. A designer can use historical data, like past sales, clothing type, fabric, patterns, color trends, to get a first idea of a potential item and build on that. From there, images can be generated. For example, for the manufacturers we work with, who then sew and produce the garments, and if you go a step further, For products where you still do photo shoots, generative AI can be used for backgrounds. You take a photo, and suddenly the product can appear in any setting you want. It even goes as far as virtual try-ons, where a user can see themselves as an avatar wearing the clothing. That's another area where generative AI can play a big role. We're running a lot of tests in that direction, always trying to make sure that, first, it can be used reliably on the customer-facing side, and second, that you don't end up with something that looks really strange, because that would be a bad user experience. But really, it's just a matter of time. As I've said, we're definitely still at the beginning. That's why it's so important to start now, to explore how we need to position ourselves, what capabilities we'll need, and which processes we'll have to change. That way, when this technology is truly ready, we'll already be there, ready to move forward with it.
That's actually a good transition to my next question. You have just mentioned the virtual aspect, and that reminds me of something that caused a lot of hype not too long ago, the whole metaverse concept. Do you think it really has a future in retail overall? Could it potentially replace physical stores at some point?
I think it's really hard to say, honestly. The biggest issue right now is the device you need to use it. I mean, with a virtual reality headset, it's just not something you can casually pick up and use. You have to consciously set aside time, sit down, and really immerse yourself. It's not like using your iPhone at all. In my view, that kind of iPhone moment hasn't happened yet. But what I saw recently at the latest Facebook conference, those Meta glasses, that's mixed reality. And for someone like me who works in innovation management, I think that's more where the future lies. I believe we'll see that kind of technology become mainstream much sooner. Like, imagine putting on glasses, standing in front of a mirror, and being able to swap clothing right there. For instance, you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and you can instantly see how a blazer would look on you. Very simple, just through the glasses, reflected in the mirror. You don't need a smart mirror for that anymore. There were some prototypes of that in the past few years, and to me, that's the more realistic scenario. As for the metaverse, it definitely still makes a lot of sense for gaming. Just think about Roblox and all the stuff happening there. That will keep evolving, beyond any doubt, and I think someday those two paths might actually converge again. But it all really depends on the devices. The hardware will determine whether people actually use it or not.
And if we go back to the topic of personalized shopping experiences, would you say augmented reality is more promising in that area, or generative artificial intelligence?
I think both can actually complement each other quite well. Generative AI helps you create experiences more efficiently, so you can scale them faster. But I believe mixed reality, everything falls under that umbrella, is currently the most promising technology when it comes to shopping experiences, whether online or offline. We already know this from past use cases. For instance, at Otto, we had a feature in the Otto app for a while that let you view a piece of furniture in your room. You could use your iPhone or another smartphone, basically projecting it into your chamber through the screen. That's a kind of mixed reality. And if you can do that directly with smart glasses without needing your phone, that's even better.
Juan Jose, now I'd like to touch upon cybersecurity. I think it's probably the second most important issue after artificial intelligence and highly relevant. One key reason is that many industries today are dealing with an enormous amount of data. They collect vast volumes, they generate huge volumes, and a lot of that includes personal data, especially in the retail and e-commerce sectors, where this is perhaps most relevant. To deliver personalized experiences, whether on a digital platform or in an app, you inevitably rely on data. That means a large amount of customer and user data is being collected. So how do you ensure within your company that customers can really feel secure when using your services, that their personal data isn't being compromised?
The first and foremost thing is, of course, compliance with legislation, data privacy regulations, and beyond. I would even say that within our organization, cybersecurity is more important than AI itself, because in the end, you need to have clear rules and principles in place, and those also apply to AI, since, as you've mentioned, you're dealing with data. That's why it's absolutely essential that any new product, anything involving AI or even just AI-infused, complies fully with all legal security and privacy requirements. Beyond that, we also design our systems in a way that ensures maximum security. For this, we have dedicated teams whose sole job is to handle these matters. Across the organization, we've defined a baseline of minimum security standards that we continuously monitor and must adhere to. Whenever there are certain things our teams still need to implement, we proactively reach out and support them. This is something we manage centrally from the Otto Group holding, simply because it's essential. That's absolutely clear, and one major advantage of being part of such a large organization is that we have so many in-house experts. Such specialists can step in and support teams that may not have that specific expertise themselves. So I always feel confident about the way our projects are handled, and yes, for us, this is truly a top priority.
And when it comes to advertising, reaching even more customers, what has your personal experience been? In general, and within the Otto Group as well. Which methods have proven to be the most effective at the moment? Across all the popular social media platforms, whether it's Instagram, TikTok or others, which combination has turned out to be the most effective recently?
Unfortunately, there's no simple answer to that, no magic formula. And if I had one, I'd probably keep it under wraps and try to monetize it. Just kidding. But seriously, it really depends. From one product group to another, from one target audience to another, things change. You probably won't reach someone like me very effectively through Instagram influencers, unlike other people. I'm convinced of that. That's why I believe as a brand, you have to automate these processes as much as possible. If you do so, you can quickly learn which media works for which audience and which product, and I still believe Pinterest is one of the most underrated platforms out there. Users who have accounts on Pinterest show natural motivation to organize products or ideas. They actively categorize and collect certain things, which theoretically makes advertising there much more efficient. I believe it really comes down to the right mix, and just as customer groups evolve, you should be open to trying out everything, and be able to do so efficiently and cost-effectively, without needing to change too much. That, in my view, is real art and what I would focus on, rather than trying to find a fixed set of advertising measures to rely on completely. Because we have brands, for example, where the print catalogue is still relevant. Even though we're experiencing a demographic shift, there are still many people out there who don't use an iPhone. They still prefer to read. So the challenge is to offer something efficient, affordable, and also sustainable, so that you can continue to reach those customers as well.
I mean, many people, especially younger generations, are used to interacting with things digitally, as mentioned. For example, many would rather select clothing on digital platforms. Instagram, for instance, often offers the possibility to go directly to a shopping platform. Nonetheless, physical retail stores still exist. So, how do you see the balance between brick-and-mortar stores, referring both to the retail sector in general and traditional shops, and digital platforms? In your opinion, will physical stores die out entirely? Or will their number simply be drastically reduced? Or do you think this balance will continue to hold steady?
Well, that's a question. Just one thought. We all assumed that our city centres would die out because of COVID. It's not that they're doing exceptionally well, but they haven't become deserted in the end. Quite on the contrary. After the pandemic, our perception and also the market data we observe show that people actually started enjoying offline shopping again. They simply wish to visit physical stores again, touch all those products, try things on. I believe that this basic human need won't change much, even in future generations. I think the concepts just need to adapt by essentially making the entire customer journey as seamless as possible from one touchpoint to another. When I was in Berlin over 10 years ago, there was a big topic we focused on. It was the so-called ROPO, Research Online, Purchase Offline. That means the way you bring offline inventory onto a digital platform. So if you're looking for a pair of shoes in, say, size 46, and there's a shop just around the corner or maybe 3 subway stops away, you can actually see if they have what you need and go buy it. Otherwise, as a customer, you'd never know. You'd have to walk through all the shops until you found one that had your size in stock. And we still haven't managed to solve that. It's due to legacy systems, and also to the fact that smaller retailers often don't see the relevance of going online. But it's happening more and more. And I think if you're an offline brand, let's say a traditional offline brand, you're simply well advised to make your inventory available online. Then the big challenge is, how do you manage your inventory in your store? Do you know how many of the white shirts are actually hanging there? In which sizes? How many might still be in the back storage? I order something.
That matches my size.
Exactly. And at some point, maybe I order exactly the same t-shirt that you want. And you're in the store while I'm still at home. You grab it off the hanger, go to the checkout while I'm on my way, and then it's gone. But these are things where I believe the experience really needs to be unified much more. It's often called multi-channel, but I think it's really one single channel with multiple options. So it's one seamless journey for the customer. They can just as well start online and finish offline.
Juan Jose, you've already mentioned sustainability. And now I'd like to explore this topic in a bit more detail. So, what specific strategies do you have regarding sustainability? I mean, it's not always easy to connect it with everyday operations, especially in the retail area. From what I've heard, there are now many initiatives, including startups, that say we dispose of old items. There are even specific business models that allow exchanging old items for new ones with a small surcharge. How do you handle this issue at Otto?
Actually, we do a lot. For Otto, sustainability is one of the most important topics, and it is also encouraged by Dr. Michael Otto. We are fully aware of our responsibility as a company and as an employer here in Hamburg. That is essential indeed. Just as our employees find it important for themselves, it is also important for the company, and we run many initiatives. So it depends on the fact that we develop and try out what you've mentioned, circularity models. We have brands that specifically create fashion lines within the circularity context. For many brands, we already do this. We work with numerous certifications for products to show that certain items are made of sustainable wood or sustainable wool, because that is also important for the consumer. Modern consumers also have a greater awareness of it, so both of us are responsible, the consumer and the company. For us, this also applies to everyday life. To work at the Otto campus here in Hamburg-Bramfeld, we act environmentally consciously there as well. How we manage our energy policies on campus, what kind of food we have in the cafeterias, it's very diverse.
When it comes to people's buying habits, for a long time, or at least that's what many believed, the idea was pretty simple. Take clothing. For example, one would normally wear an item for a certain period before deciding to get something new. But in recent years, or even decades, their wearing and buying habits have obviously changed. It's clear that people now have much shorter wearing times for a single piece of clothing. Now they are more likely to shop seasonally. That means they buy a piece of clothing, wear it for one season, and then buy another one. Can this really be reconciled with sustainability?
Barely possible, I would say. Fast fashion is, of course, a big problem, and customers expect certain things from you. And then you have to weigh how far you're willing to go to meet that demand, and to what extent you want to raise awareness among customers about what that actually means. What fast fashion really means. In the end, it's very hard to truly reconcile those things. What might be possible in the future, though, potentially through technology, is that production sites could move closer to the customer. I mean, they might no longer be located primarily in Asia, but more in the European region, especially for European companies. And with that, you could significantly reduce your carbon footprint while still achieving the necessary speed to keep up with seasonal changes and fashion cycles. But customers are also more aware of the sustainability issue now. And we all know brands like Patagonia, a brand that has fully embraced and committed itself to this cause. And as a result, people aren't constantly buying new jackets that they just use for a short time. Circularity is important, meaning how you can bring products back into the cycle and focus on repair. Absolutely. You know, if you can repair something like a zipper on that jacket and do it easily, then suddenly that jacket has a different kind of value again.
Juan Jose, I have one more short set of questions, this time on a more personal note. The first one is about your involvement with Two Hearts, an organization that supports professionals with diverse backgrounds. I think it would be really interesting to hear more about that, especially since you have already mentioned that you used to move around a lot growing up. You've lived in different countries as well, so tell me a bit. What kind of organization is Two Hearts?
Gladly. So Two Hearts was founded a few years ago with the aim of bringing together people who feel like they have two hearts beating inside them. In the context of Germany, that often means people who were born and raised here, but whose families, parents or grandparents originally came from somewhere else. And in everyday life, you constantly come across this question: where are you really from? Like, are you truly German? Or are you, like in my case, I come from Guatemala originally, from somewhere else. You get asked things like that a lot. Either people notice from how you look, or your German maybe isn't perfect, but you still feel German. And I think the big question is, can you be both, German and something else? And my answer, and the answer we share at Two Hearts is absolutely. And sometimes it's not just two. You might even carry more than one identity within you. And when you look at today's globalized and digitalized world, Two Hearts is really a community that connects people with similar backgrounds. People who now work in Germany, in startups, in large companies, in all kinds of roles. And the idea is that we support each other, learn from each other, and especially show young people who might be asking themselves the same questions, that we all live and work here, and belong here. And if you take that further, you could say that in a country like ours, where due to demographic changes we'll need a lot of migration to fill skilled jobs, basically all the jobs we'll need in the future, it's also a platform to open doors for people who come here and help them with their integration. I was very fortunate because my father was a diplomat. That meant I was able to come to Germany. Growing up as the child of a diplomat is different, so I traveled a lot. I had to constantly adjust to new cultures, new schools, new people, and the more important all those identities I carry inside me became. Actually, they have shaped my personality in a way, how I stand for what I believe in, and how I meet and treat people. And I am always open when I meet new people.
That's definitely a great enrichment of life. And it also gives you the chance to really see familiar things from a different perspective. They say language even partly shapes how a person thinks. So when you grow up learning another language, you naturally take on that culture as well. In that context, I just wanted to ask you, are there things in your family that are typically German? And are there also things you do more like people in the country you come from, in your case, Guatemala? How is your family life set up?
Well, I'd say we have a good mix. When you have kids, of course, new traditions naturally develop. You adapt what you know from your childhood and what your partner knows from theirs. The environment you live in shapes things a lot as well. For example, when we celebrate Christmas, we do it very much the German way. For instance, we give presents here on Christmas Eve. But when I was a kid in Guatemala, gifts were given on the 25th, just like in the US, on Christmas Day. So there, the day when people exchange gifts isn't Christmas Eve, but Christmas Day actually. I always found that kind of funny. It felt different to me. My mother is Spanish. So I carry those two hearts in me, so to speak. And there it's really on the Epiphany, the Three Kings Day, when more gifts are traditionally given. But globalization definitely has changed many things. For us, language is probably the most important part. My kids are growing up just like I did. Also, I like mixing languages. When I talk to my wife or kids, I speak German, but throw in Spanish words. Or the other way around. When I speak Spanish, there are certain German words that are just more precise. So I use those because they express exactly what I want to say. And that's basically it.
That important German precision, especially that which comes from the language itself.
Exactly. Just the fact that you can combine two nouns into one new word makes it so simple. In Spanish, you'd always have to describe something with several words. Like, that is something of this. You can't create a new compound word like that. My kids are learning that and growing up with it. And I think that's what has influenced me the most culturally. Language.
Great. I'd like to ask you some more personal questions again. What do you like about being a person of three cultures? Look, you don't just carry two hearts inside you, as you've said, but actually three hearts. Because there's Guatemala, there's Spain, and now there's also Germany. Which qualities would you describe as typically German, typically Guatemalan, and typically Spanish?
To be honest, it's quite difficult to say, and I think a lot of it always depends on this or that person. But what I can say from my experience growing up in Germany and living here for many years is that German precision stands out a lot. That German ability to pay attention to detail and to go the extra mile. That's always important. At the same time, it's paired with that Latin American or Spanish way of life, when you quickly make decisions, get things done, and then see how it works out afterward. It's about being flexible because life changes so rapidly. For example, I come from Guatemala. Guatemala has gone through political instability, years under dictatorship. So life is always a challenge there. You constantly have to adapt when unexpected things happen. That's what we have already touched upon. It's about change, how life teaches you again and again how to quickly find a way to move forward. That's something I carry very deeply within myself. And as for being Spanish, yes, I think it's actually quite similar to Guatemala. I'd say depending on where in Spain you come from. My family comes from the south of Spain, so it feels much, much closer. And what you find there is also the warmth, the sense of familiarity. But you find that in Germany too. It might not show itself as openly, but at its core, in people's values, it's there.
Thank you for this great conversation, Juan Jose.
Thank you.